All right, this is Justin Grooms with another episode of the Wrapped in Skin podcast. This is episode 9. And as always, nothing changes. Thank you all for tuning in, checking in with me. Hopefully everyone's well. Hopefully the last episode blessed you, gave you some insight into a few things. The feedback has been phenomenal on that episode. I mean, it's been really phenomenal on every episode. And that's not to pat myself on the back. That's really to give you all kudos for, really listening to the material and the information and, sharing the content with people in your circle and people you work with and your colleagues. And I can't, again, thank you enough for doing that. And it leads me to believe that the material and the content's having some sort of impact and effect on you. So, and that's ultimately my goal. So, and this is no different. What I do want to say is that there's going to be 2 more episodes prior to Christmas break. And then probably going to come back towards the end of January, beginning of February with a completely new season with some revamped content. We're going to be doing some videos, and I think I'm still going to be doing the solo thing, but I'm also going to try to, and I've said this before, try to bring some people in and get some differing opinions, some other insights, add a couple of wrinkles to the podcast. But most of you like it as is, and I can't overstate this enough that this podcast is not for everyone, right? It's specifically designed the way it is for the people who need it. And so I'm going to continue to try to remain true to that and not do too many things outside of that normal way of operating. But we're going to try some new stuff at the beginning of the year and see how it works, see how y'all like it. But until that point, we're going to continue to rock and talk the way we've been talking. This is a really interesting point of conversation that I want to have, because I think a lot of the issues that we deal with on an interpersonal level come down to this topic that I'm going to discuss today. Whether they be how we interact with one another, whether it be how we pursue our careers, how we interact with our family, our relationship with God. A lot of it boils down to this one word. And this one word is something called loneliness. It's a hard topic and a hard issue to really discuss, because there's a lot of different schools of thought on being alone with yourself and taking time away from the crowd and actually, doing some work in your alone time. But, I think that's very different from what loneliness really is and what it can really feel like and how it can really impact the way you go about your life and how you feel about yourself. And that's not to say that you can be around a lot of people and still be extremely lonely, right? Or you can be by yourself and be fulfilled. So there's times, right? There's times, seasons, and periods that you go through where you may need to be alone. But then there's also times that by nature we're social creatures. We're not designed to be alone. God did not see it fit that man was by himself. Otherwise, there would not be a woman. So, there's a very specific design that we have as human beings that lends itself to us being in a group situation, or at least with a partner, right? So I kind of wanted to talk about that and the aspects of it, and then unpack how it can affect us, as we move forward in our life. What I want to start by doing, though, is I actually want to read some quotes on loneliness from some people that you may know or have heard of, right? And this goes to show you how impactful that word is, and how no matter what your status is or what you've accomplished, you can still experience some loneliness. So the first quote I want to read says, "Loneliness is my least favorite thing about life. That thing that I'm most worried about is just being alone without anybody to care for or someone who would care for me." And that quote is from Anne Hathaway, who's a relatively famous actor that you probably all know. The second quote I want to read is, it says, "The most terrible poverty is loneliness and the feeling of being unloved." That's Mother Teresa. This one is one of my favorites. It says, "Music was my refuge. I could crawl into the space between the notes and curl my back to the loneliness. That's Maya Angelou. Who else would have said something so poetic? The other quote I want to read is, we're happy, free, confused, and lonely at the same time. There's a few young women watching or listening to this who probably recognize that as a Taylor Swift lyric. And then the final one, and I think this is kind of important to what I really want to discuss and how I want to attack this topic. This quote says, we're all islands shouting lies to each other across seas of misunderstanding. That's Rudyard Kipling. So the reason I wanted to read that last is because I think a lot of us find ourselves in seasons of loneliness. And it may not be because we don't have people in our lives who love us or care for us, or we haven't had people in our lives who love us or care for us. But I think what we sometimes do is we're too quick to throw people away because we think they aren't providing us anything. We could be in a relationship and we're frustrated with how the relationship's going. And when I say relationships, I'm not just talking about romantic relationships. I'm talking about family relationships, friendships. Sometimes we get frustrated with one another and our patience runs pretty thin. And then we find ourselves throwing people away, or people throw us away for whatever reason. And then there's a difficulty of reconnecting. Now, I do want to be really clear right here. I'm not saying that you should entertain nonsense and that you should allow people to stay in your life if they're not doing you any good. And for sure, if they're doing harm to you. But what I am saying is that, sometimes our ego gets in the way and we burn bridges between us and people who are meant to be in our lives. We've gone through a rough patch. We haven't seen eye to eye. And maybe you do need a little bit of a break. But sometimes it's just that. It's just a break to reconnect with your own thoughts, to sit with your own interpersonal dialogue, have your time with God, and then get back to that relationship. Because I think there's some people who are meant to be in our lives, not just for a season, but long term. And only you can discern that. And only you and God can discern that. But what I find often is that people consistently burn bridges and they are consistently alienating themselves. And they do it sometimes under the guise of, well, I can do bad all by myself. And that's a dangerous place to be, because the loneliness, when you get to this place of isolation, whether you want to talk about the devil infiltrating your psyche, or if you want to just talk about you becoming your own worst enemy because you're sitting alone with your thoughts for so long, it can become a dark hole, right, that you find it difficult to climb out of. So I just want to warn you to not allow yourself to be isolated and alienated for too long, because that typically is not a healthy place to be. And again, I can't tell you how many people I hear say, look, it's just me and God and that's all I need. And what I honestly believe is, while that is true, if you don't have God, God is like the sun, right? If you don't have the sun, there is no life, right? So if you don't have God, there's no life. Your life should revolve around God, just as the earth revolves around the sun. However, there's still other elements that you need to have a full life. And as I said this before, just earlier, that if God didn't think that you were meant to be with someone else or partner with someone in this life, he wouldn't have created more than one individual. So the reality is, as much as you're right, you do need God. And that's the main thing that you need. God is placing people in your life. There's this story. For some reason, I've been telling this story a lot over the past couple of weeks because it's been coming up in conversation. There's this parable where it talks about there was this guy whose boat was shipwrecked. Well, not shipwrecked. He was stranded in the middle of the ocean. And he was praying to God, please help me, God. Please get me out of this mess. And just praying over and over and over, and all day long, he's praying to God to get him out of this situation. And after a few days, a boat comes by and they yell to him and said, are you good? Do you need help? And he says, no, God's got me. God's got me. And they said, what do you mean? He said, well, God's going to save me. And so after some time, the boat leaves. So 2 more days go by. Another ship comes by and they say, hey, do you need help? He says, no, I'm good. God's got me. God's got me. And so they eventually leave. And then another day goes by and he's still praying feverishly. He's praying to God. And God says, you fool, I sent you help. What do you keep praying to me about? Get on one of the boats. And I use that to say, sometimes God sends people in our lives because we need them and they need us. And I think I just want to make sure that we're not too careful or too quick to throw people away because they're not serving us in the way we think they should serve us. Sometimes we can get caught up in our own lives and our own needs and then forget that the other person involved also has needs and they also have a life. And this is a mutually beneficial relationship, or at least it should be, right? So I wanted to get on that topic first, because again, I think sometimes loneliness is a self-inflicted wound sometimes. And that's not every case. There are multiple reasons that people find themselves alone. But I'm always been of the mindset that first control what you can control. And if you start focusing on factors that are outside of your control, you give away your power. So when I think about loneliness in my own personal life, there have been times where I've self-inflicted the isolation. I've chosen to isolate myself. I've chosen to remove myself from the crowd. Now, again, and please hear this clearly, it is a good thing to remove yourself periodically from a crowd, specifically a crowd who's not serving you, a partner who's not serving you, a relationship that's not serving you. It's good to remove yourself, gather your thoughts, spend time alone with yourself, getting to know who you are, because ultimately, if you don't know who you are, it's going to be hard for anyone else to figure you out as well. So you need that time, but don't tarry in that space. Don't let it linger too long. Be conscious of, how long have I been isolated? Am I developing good relationships? Or have I isolated myself for so long that the relationships have gotten brittle and fragile? And not only have I sat too long in my own thoughts, but the other person just thinks that I'm not interested in cultivating a relationship. So they may have gone their own way in separate ways and not have really given much thought to that relationship either. So then it becomes increasingly more difficult to reconnect with that person. If you're listening to this, especially specifically around, we're in the holiday season, I feel like this is when loneliness is the most pervasive, because you can know that you're lonely, but when you start seeing people with their families, you start hearing people talk about traveling and spending time elsewhere with loved ones, that's when the loneliness becomes real. It becomes palpable, right? And, I think that's what this is really why I wanted to talk about this topic at this point in time, because there's a lot of people out there who are going to be dealing with loneliness throughout this holiday season. And again, if you can control it, if you can start to mend some of those relationships, I think it's worth your while to do that. And maybe you don't go back to old relationships, but another thing about isolation is that it's like if you sit in a dark room for a long period of time and then you go outside, the sun is going to hurt your eyes, right? Because your eyes have become acclimated to the dark and now they have to become reacclimated to the light. It's the same thing with isolation. If you isolate yourself and then you try to go out and cultivate new relationships, it's going to be difficult because you've been so long by yourself that you've almost forgotten those skills that allow you to cultivate good, solid relationships, meet new people, network, all that good stuff. So even if you're not going back to old relationships, loneliness and isolation makes it more difficult for you to cultivate even new relationships. So then a logical question becomes, well, Justin, how do I know if those people were in my life and they weren't, and we couldn't get along and we couldn't get the relationship going the way we wanted to, then what's the use in going back to that? It just didn't work out. And I would rather do bad all by myself. I'm sure we've heard that. And a lot of times what I think about is most of those relationships that I know, again, whether they be romantic, family, friendships, there was no anchor point. There was no foundation that held it together. And the foundation of every relationship should be God. And if God is not the foundation of your relationship, the relationship is not going to flourish. I went to the doctor not too long ago. I go to the doctor a couple times a year. If you're a man out there, particularly if you're a black man, man, take your butt to the doctor at least 2 times a year. Get the semi-annual checkup. If you can't do 2 times a year, at least go annually. But anyway, I went to the doctor, got blood work done. And this was the beginning of the year. So the doctor said that I was deficient in a couple different vitamins and minerals. Now, if you know me, you know I'm relatively healthy. I like to take care of myself, try to eat relatively healthy. I try to work out as much as I can, all that good stuff, right? So when he said that, I was like, there's no way. I eat well, I take supplements, I do all that good stuff. There's no way I can be deficient. And he said, just because you're taking them doesn't mean that your body is absorbing them. He said you may need to add fiber to your diet, which, if you don't know, fiber aids in the absorption of certain vitamins and minerals. So you can be taking in all kind of vitamins and minerals, and your body's not absorbing them because you don't have the fiber needed. Now, I'm going to talk about fiber and vitamins because I believe in most relationships, we're quick to say, well, that relationship isn't serving me. Well, it's probably because you haven't introduced the fiber, and the fiber is God. So if God is missing from that relationship, there's going to be no benefit to you. Yeah, specifically long term. Now, you may have some initial benefit, specifically if it's a romantic relationship. You may have an initial attraction or lust that keeps you entertained for some time. But a long term relationship with our God is not going to provide you with the nutrients that you need. So God is the fiber in all of your relationships. And if you cease to include him, then you're going to look at that relationship as if it's not beneficial for you. When what actually may be the case is that you haven't figured out how to absorb what that relationship is trying to give you. God may have brought somebody into your life and you don't know why. And you don't know why because you haven't asked for discernment from the source, from the creator of the universe that brought that person into your life. Now, God may say, again, I brought that person into your life for a reason. I brought that person into your life for a season, or I brought that person into your life for a lifetime, but you will never know if you don't go to the source. Now, we're in a very unique time in the sense of you can be completely alone and have a false sense of connectivity, right? You can be completely isolated. You may have abandoned all of your real life relationships, and yet you have a false sense of connectivity because of social media. Social media has made loneliness an even worse disease. Before, if you went a few days without real human interaction, you made it a point to go out and see people, right? I got to get around some people, man. You made it a point. You had to go see some people. You had to go talk to some people. You had to put yourself in some situations where you were engaged with another human being. Now, social media is giving you a false sense of connectivity. So you think you're in community when what you really have is the counterfeit of community. So I'll say that again. Social media has given you this false sense of community, and what it really is counterfeit community. You know, if you ingest like certain artificial sweeteners, your body over time becomes less efficient in digesting the real sugars. Let me slow down and say that again, because I think y'all know where I'm going with this. If you ingest artificial sweeteners, your body over time becomes less efficient in digesting real sugars because it's been exposed to these fake sugars for so long, right? The less likely you are to reap the benefits of real food when you're ingesting artificial food. And we wonder why we can't develop real relationships because we're ingesting these artificial relationships. We are engaged in this artificial community. We are entertained by artificial groups of people who we don't know anything about and who don't know anything about us. And because we're so used to the fake stuff, we don't know when the real one shows up. Or because we're so used to the fake stuff, we don't know when the real stuff is missing from our lives. Right? So we think we are good because we wake up in the morning, open Instagram, and you think you're really friends with this person that you've been following for the last 5 years. And they don't know you from Adam or Eve. And you don't know them from Adam or Eve. And so you get swept up into this, this sense of belonging to something. And it's not real. And you wonder why you can't get full. Like you are, man, I feel connected, kinda, but I'm still empty. Because fulfillment comes through realness. And you can ingest all the fake and all the artificial that you want. And it's only going to leave you feeling more empty, thirstier, hungrier. And before you know it, you look up and you don't even recognize what real relationships look like. You don't know how to develop them. You don't know how to maintain them. You don't even know how to communicate beyond however many characters you can put on Twitter, now X, or Threads, or whatever it is, or whatever fits in your caption. People can't even have real life conversations because they're used to communicating in sound bites, right? Now, what's even more diabolical about being in that situation of not realizing that you're lonely because you have this fake connectivity or this fake community, what is really dangerous about that is because when you don't realize there's an issue, you don't go ask God to help you fix it, right? So if you read a verse like Psalm 34, I think it's 34:18, it says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." And that's true. But if you are acting like you're not brokenhearted, if you're acting like you're not crushed in spirit, then you won't go to God in prayer and meditation for that. If you look at Psalm 25:16, it says, "I am lonely and afflicted. Relieve the troubles of my heart and free me from my anguish." Again, this is David acknowledging that he is lonely, that he is afflicted, and that he has a troubled heart and a troubled spirit. And he's asking, as such, please help strengthen me and relieve me from this. He goes on to say, "O Lord, all my longing is before you. My sighing is not hidden from you." And if you, again, I know I'm reiterating this, I can't get the word out, reiterating stuff a lot. But I just feel like a lot of us don't know where we are. And when you look at people who commit suicide, and I'm not by any means proclaiming to be an expert on suicide or anything like that, but I believe a lot of it has to do with people who come to the realization too late that they are lonely, that they are brokenhearted, that their spirit is weak. And by the time they realize it, they've spiraled so far out of control that they can't even see a way to get connected or reconnected because they've been in that hole for too long. It's like I said before, when you come out and the sunlight hurts your eyes, it's not even that you can't see right away. There's a pain associated with opening your eyes in the sunlight when you've been in a dark room for so long. So when you've been disconnected for so long and you try to reconnect, there's almost a pain that's associated with the idea of, oh my God, I've got to go out and talk to people. I've got to really put myself out there and make friends. There's an anxiety that comes along with it. And social anxiety is more prevalent today than I think it's ever been because people don't know how to communicate. I work with kids a lot, and I was talking to kids who, pre-pandemic, they may have been in 7th grade or going into 7th grade, and then they take 2.5, 3 years off, and now suddenly they're high school students. And so their development has been arrested. So now when they try to develop relationships, because they missed those really fundamental developmental years, it's hard for them to establish real connectivity and relationships. And the downfall of that is they just say, forget it. I'll just get on social media and I'll connect there. People can't judge me there. I can say whatever I want to there. I can put a fake avatar up. I can say whatever my handle is, my Instagram handle. It doesn't have to be my real name. I can say all kinds of stuff and not have to have any repercussions from it, not have to have people judge me on it because they don't know the real me. And so again, you get this false sense of a voice, of a relationship and it's not real. And it's not real. And a lot of people get to a place where they just are exhausted at the idea of developing and establishing a real relationship. To back up a little bit and bring it all full circle, I think there's a process that everyone needs to go through when we're thinking about where we are on an interpersonal level with our health, with our well-being, and are we evaluating ourselves accurately? Are we acting as if we're isolated because we want to be isolated? Or are we really truly lonely? And if we are really truly lonely, the first step is to ask God for understanding. Ask him to heal your heart. As David said in that verse, he said, I am lonely and afflicted. Relieve the troubles of my heart. Free me from this anguish. And he will, if you ask him, if you admit that, look, I'm not where I need to be. I don't feel good being isolated. I know this is not what you want from me. If it is, give me revelation for it. Show me what it is that you would have me discern in this time of not loneliness, but this time of isolation. But please make it quick. And if it be in his will to make it quick, he will. But then the next thing you have to do is evaluate, what have you done to maybe sever relationships that probably shouldn't have been severed? And again, that's asking for discernment. God, is this relationship something that I should salvage, or something that I should continue to try to reconnect with? Or is it something that's water under the bridge and I should move on? And if that's the case, then God, bring me who else into my life that you would have me partner with in certain endeavors in this thing called life. Show me who you want me to be in communion with consistently. And then the next step and the final step is that you actually got to go out and put that into action. Put your phone down, get off social media, and go out and develop some real relationships. If it's with your family, if you've had some arguments, if you're not seeing eye to eye, trust me, life is short. It's very short. And I'm very aware that it takes two people to want to work a relationship out. But do what you can and let the chips fall where they may. But go out and develop some relationships, get some friends, get into a community, get connected to real people, have real conversations, because this life is fleeting. And I wish all of you prosperous and healthy relationships, because I think, and I told somebody this the other day, I have these conversations with men all the time. When I look at successful men and women too, but I'm speaking from a man's perspective. When I look at the men I consider successful, and I'm not talking about people who just are comfortable, or even men who are rich. What I'm talking about is men who are wealthy. I'm not just talking about financially wealthy, but wealthy in their spirit, wealthy in their finances, wealthy in their health. Those men are typically connected to a consistent partner, right? They have someone in their life who is a constant, someone who is there for them, who helps them, who is there to console them, to comfort them. It doesn't mean they won't have hard times and difficult times between the two of them. But the men I know who are very, very successful, what I would consider success, they have that constant in their lives, that partnership, because partnership is really important. And maybe it's not with your wife, maybe it's not with your husband, but maybe you have constant partnerships with a friend, constant partnerships with someone from church, constant partnerships with a family member, someone who is always there for you when you need them. Because this thing called life is tough, man, and it's hard to do it by yourself. So if you're out there and you're lonely, you're feeling loneliness in this holiday season, I would say first, get in the Word. Second, reconcile within yourself. What can you do to either reconnect with people or cultivate new relationships? And then put one foot in front of the other and go out there and try to develop some relationships and get really connected to people who you trust and people who will be there for you. Because for this time, while you're wrapped in the skin, you will be, if you choose it to be so, the very best of God. But that's going to take a lot of community, a lot of faith, a lot of worship, and a lot of action. I love y'all. Y'all be good. Talk to you soon. That's a wrap for this episode, pun intended. I want to thank you for joining us. We hope that you learned something about yourself. hopefully you heard something that you had otherwise never thought of in that way. We welcome your comments. Please share, subscribe, talk about this with your friends. Our goal is to talk next time about something that you want to hear specifically. So comment, message us, email us, let us know what you want to hear, what you want us to talk about, what you thought about this episode. And we'll catch you next time. That'll be good.